morning. My name is Melissa McKay. I am the Annuals Greenhouse Manager here at Bates Nursery, and today I'd like to talk to you about cutting gardens. I used to think a few years ago that bringing home a bouquet of flowers was kind of a waste of resources, especially when I could have all these flowers out in my yard. But a couple of years ago, I really got on board with trying different flowers and cutting big bouquets and bringing them in, and it just made me happier. I mean, it may be a little frivolous for some, but it just brings me joy. So I'm going to share with you some of my tips on growing a great cutting garden. First of all, you don't need a whole lot of space. Obviously, if you had 100 square feet of garden, you could plant abundance of flowers and have even more to bring in. But if you're only working with a back patio, zinnias and cosmos and even some dwarf varieties of sunflowers are really easy to just plant in containers and have on your back deck to cut some little modest bouquets. For your soil, a lot of these seeds aren't very picky like your zinnias and your sunflowers, but obviously you'll get more blooms if you add in some compost with the top couple of inches of your soil. After you plant, you can scratch in some slow release fertilizer, or you could use a water soluble fertilizer like Miracle Grow. You can use that every couple of weeks. Now, the way to get the most blooms from your flowers is to look at that middle number of your fertilizer. You get a 3-number combo with fertilizer. That first number is your nitrogen content, second number is your phosphorus, and your third number is the potassium. That phosphorus is going to be the one that really boosts your bloom production. So look for that high middle number when you're picking out a fertilizer for your flower garden. Seeds. The most economical way, of course, is to use seeds to get your flowers started. For about $5 or less, you can get a packet of like 25 to 50 seeds, and that's 25 or 50 little plants that you have there. Few seed packets I brought with me are the Come and Cut Again zinnias. Zinnias are my favorite. Love zinnias. Well, actually, sunflowers are my favorite. Sunflowers here, and there's so many different varieties. You can get the really tall ones, you can get some short ones, you can get red ones, orange ones, lots of varieties in your sunflowers other than just your big yellow sunny sunflowers. Cosmos are also great. This is a red mix here. I really prefer this guy here that has a mixture of pinks and whites. That's usually called the Sensation Mix. For early in the spring, when it's a little too cool for your zinnias and your cosmos, you can plant things like your bachelor's buttons, because these guys really like it kind of cool. So bachelor's buttons, super easy to start from seed. In fact, a lot of times I like to spread these in the fall, and then they are one of the first things to germinate in the spring. You can spread them in the spring, but you could also do a fall spreading as well. The zinnias and the cosmos, you can pretty much just sprinkle on top of the soil, and then you can just spread like a little thin layer of soil over the top. They don't need a whole lot of cover up. Your sunflowers, you want to plant those about a couple of inches deep into the soil. Now, if you're into the instant gratification, you can always go with plant starts, and Bates, of course, has a huge selection of those. We do have some zinnias. Probably our best cutting garden mix of zinnias that we sell are called the State Fair zinnias. Those are going to get about 3 to 4 feet tall. Cut them. The more you cut them, the more they produce. They just produce like crazy up until frost. Like, I was pulling them out of the ground in November of last year. So great little flowers. This one is not the State Fair mix, but it gives you an idea of what kind of bloom you will get with the State Fair. This one's actually Magellan orange, and it's only going to get to maybe a couple of feet tall. And then I showed you the little Cosmo mix here. Cosmos are great also. Just cut them. They keep producing more and more. One of my favorites that I used last year is the Lisianthus. Now this doesn't get very tall. It only gets to about a couple of feet tall, but the stalk is long enough, I found, for some of my shorter vases. And I just love that blue bloom. It's so hard to get blue in your flowers, and this is a great shade of blue for your flower arrangements. I love this so much that I bought a couple of extra this year, so I have lots and lots of these. Sunflowers, we don't really sell a lot of sunflower starts. With the zinnias and cosmos, you can cut those and they'll just keep on producing and producing. Sunflowers are very different. You plant a seed for a sunflower, it sends up like a stalk of blooms, and then it kind of goes to seed and it's done doing what it's going to do. So really, sunflowers are best started from seed, and if you want to keep a crop going all summer, the best way to do that is to plant in succession, like maybe every couple of weeks, plant a couple new seeds. That way you constantly have new sunflowers popping up and blooming. Now we do have here at Bates a little option. We have the Sunfinity sunflowers. So this gives you a sunflower, and this is, I haven't planted this one yet, but supposedly it's going to bloom for you all summer. So this would be a way to have your sunflowers and keep them going throughout the season. We also have the Sunbelievable here. This is another type of annual sunflower that's gonna bush out, and it's just gonna keep producing flowers all through the season. Another one that I haven't planted yet, but I've seen it in a lot of floral arrangements, so I'm going to try it this year, is Ageratum. This particular variety gets a couple of feet tall, so it's better than your little ground cover Ageratum. That's only going to get like a few inches tall, but this guy's going to get tall enough. Again, it's got that blue that's really hard to find in your blooms. Great one. Love, love, love the Gomphrena. I was going to talk about this in our fillers, but this is a great little filler. Blooms like crazy. You can start this from seed. We have a couple of different varieties here at Bates. The Fireworks is the one that I'm looking at here. Great little pink blooms, little pom-poms, little orange at the tips there. I just love it. I'm going to talk about bulbs. Winter here is gray and gross and dreary, and I'm wanting to bring flowers in as soon as humanly possible. And the way to do that is you plant bulbs in the fall for daffodils. Daffodils and tulips and your bearded iris. Great things to plant in the fall, and then they're going to be some of the first things to bloom in the spring. In my floral arrangement I brought in today, the daffodils, of course, are already done, daffodils and tulips, but I do have some of my bearded iris that I've cut. A lot of people think that bearded iris is kind of a boring plant because, 11 months out of the year it doesn't really do anything, but that 1 month, I love my iris blooms. So great cut flowers. They're long-lasting cut flowers. And then in the spring, there are bulbs you can plant. Oriental lilies. You can plant calla lilies. You can plant dahlias. Dahlias was another one of my favorites from last year. I mean, that bloom is just gorgeous. And this was another one that I was having to pull up in November. It just kept on going. So it's a great little bulb. The dahlias, the calla lilies, gladiolas, I don't have an example of that yet because they're not blooming yet. Those kind of things, the callas, the dahlias, and the gladiolas, those are not going to be totally hardy here. They're kind of marginally hardy. Occasionally I've left a couple of gladiolas in the ground and they've come up the next year, but I dug all these up last year, cleaned them off really well, and stored them in bags of sawdust in my garage over the winter. Pulled them out a few weeks ago. They were already starting to put out little green shoots, so they look like they're ready to go. I planted them in the ground last week, so I'm excited to see what I'm going to get from those this year. Lilies, there's not really a way I've found to keep oriental lilies blooming all the way through the season. They're kind of like sunflowers too. They'll put up a stalk, they'll bloom, then they'll be done. Gladiolas are the same way, but with the gladiola bulbs, you can plant those in succession. You can plant some and then like maybe 2 weeks later plant a few more, and that way you keep a crop of your gladiolas going all through the summer. One of my favorite annuals that I forgot to mention is the snapdragon. I've never really planted these from seed. I bought some of the plant starts last year actually, and they overwintered for me and have already started blooming this spring. So these are blooms from last year's crop. And if you buy the rocket mix or the tall mix, those are going to be blooms that are going to get to about 3 feet tall. Great for floral arrangements. There are some snapdragons that are more of a dwarf variety, so you want to make sure you get that rocket mix or the tall variety of snapdragon. Sometimes they kind of stop blooming in the heat of the summer, but like I said, mine lasted all through the winter and came back again. I planted a whole lot more this year, so I'm excited to see how many of those make it through the winter. But they are typically considered an annual, so don't count on them coming back. That was a happy surprise for me. So perennials. Perennials are a great way to bring in some cut flowers into your arrangements. Perennials don't bloom for the most part from spring all the way to frost. They have seasons of bloom. So you just kind of have to enjoy the blooms while they're there, and then when they're done blooming, move on to something else for your arrangements. For my arrangement here, I added in some yarrow. That's a great cut flower. This is Nepeta, catmint. Love to put my lavender in arrangements. This one here is a Spanish lavender. And the phlox. The tall phlox is a great cut flower as well. Other options, cone flowers. Love my cone flowers. The most basic one is just your purple, but there are so many hybrids now. You can get cone flowers in just about any color imaginable, and they make a long cut flower. They'll stay in your vase looking fresh for a long time. Another one is going to be daisies. I wish this was blooming a little better, but everybody knows daisies, white, little yellow, cheery, happy flowers. Love my daisies. And kind of like the gomphrena, we have, this is called Verbena bonariensis. And you get these little bitty purple flowers, and it just makes a great little filler kind of sticking out on the sides of your arrangements. For greenery, I have people ask me, what can I use as a greenery for my arrangements? One of the best things I like to use is herbs, really. You get the greenery, and then you also get the fragrance. If you're using flowers that don't really have much of a fragrance, this is how you can get some fragrance. And here I used my bronze fennel. I have so much of this growing in my yard. I use it in almost every one of my arrangements. And I just love the little airy texture that it gives to an arrangement. You can also use dill. It's this guy right here. Probably for dill, you might want to do, like with the sunflowers, keep a crop going by spreading a few seeds every few weeks, because this isn't a very long-lasting herb. Other herbs you can use that have great strong stems, your rosemary. I have a little example of that in here. Rosemary's great. Greek oregano, mint, those have really strong stems, so they're going to stand up nicely in your vases. Other options for greenery, I like to use coleus. So you could go with just a solid green variety of coleus, and that's going to give you your greenery here. Or you could get fun and use some of the color coleus, like the oranges and the reds. Those are fun. You can go with some perennials. I like to use hosta leaves occasionally. Those are great as fillers. What I've got here in my vase is Solomon seal, also a great option, and it's very long lasting. The other greenery I've got here is going to be calla lily leaves. Most people think of using the calla lilies, just the lilies in their arrangements. I like the leaves. I don't know if you can see it here, but this leaf is speckled with little white speckles here. It's a fun little addition to your arrangement. Caladiums. Obviously not a perennial, but a great way to bring in just some big leaves, green leaves texture for your arrangements. And you can even get a little dramatic and have something draping out. You can use ivy. You can use some sweet potato vine. This here is a just potato vine, not sweet potato vine, but just potato vine. And that's pretty. So, and I've not tried this yet, but asparagus fern. You could also use this as a filler. Probably not for a big vase like this, but maybe a shorter little flower arrangement. Lastly, some shrubs that you can use for cutting arrangements. Obviously, you've got the hydrangea. This is the Annabelle hydrangea here. Great big old white blooms, lots of drama, gorgeous, long blooming. They bloom most of the summer, so great option. And then everybody's favorite, the rose. I am going to try my hand at planting roses this year. I've never tried it before, but this is a David Austin variety. That's one of the better varieties for cut arrangements. And you see how nice and full this one is here. And it is a little fragrant, so you get some fragrance in your arrangements there. Peonies, those are not really shrubs. I think they would be more like an herbaceous perennial, but I love peony blooms. Kind of like the irises, they're kind of boring for about 11 months of the year, but that 1 month, the blooms are just stunning and gorgeous and floral arrangements. You might want to think about interest for fall and winter arrangements, and you can do that with some berries. This is Hypericum here, St. John's wort. I clipped this from, I didn't see any on the lot that were actually flowering or had the red berries yet. So I clipped these from my yard, and it's such a young shrub. I only had like 2 branches that were actually doing anything. So I brought in the 2 that I had. But this nice little red berry, I mean, you can use it any time of year in your arrangements, but it's especially fun in your fall and winter arrangements. And you can also use holly and any of the other shrubs that produce berries. The beauty berry, that one's a purple berry, that one's great. For early in the spring, you can use branches of forsythia and pussy willows. Those are great to add to your arrangements. That's pretty much all I have here for planting a cutting garden. There's so many options out there. I just told you about a few of my favorites. Experiment, get creative, and just have fun with it.